Bleh, that was hard to say. There's a lot of similar words there. Hello Bookworm family, welcome back to my channel. I'm Danny. If you're new, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell if you haven't already, because I have been posting bonus footage this week, and if you are not notified, then you would not know that I posted it. And it's pretty cool bonus footage of one's a vlog and one was a book unboxing. So if you haven't seen those yet, go check them out. I will link them down below. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. Sometimes I forget. Definitely forget a lot. But also, if you're not following me on Instagram, it is at @the_dancing_bookworm. And I post on there way more than I post on here. So you guys should definitely go over to my Instagram and check out my full reviews on there. So January felt like it went really slow. However, because it felt like it went really slow, I was able to get a lot of reading in. I read 9 books. My goal was 10. I didn't get to Scoot Over and Make Some Room by Heather Avis. I did put that back on my shelf because I don't think, looking at my February TBR, I'll be able to squeeze it in for that month either. But it is one of my top priority books. I do love Heather Avis, and the fact that her and her husband adopted 2 children with Down syndrome really fills my heart with joy. And I read Lucky Few by her last year, and I want to get to it this year. However, that book was not on my TBR, so I did not have to pick an extra book for my February TBR. I did get through all 7 that were on my TBR, plus 2 extra ones to go towards my Reading Rivalry Friends book readathon that I did this month. So I've decided that every month I'm going to give you guys a little bit of statistics for that month, just so you guys can kind of keep up with like the numbers with me, because I feel like I get to the end of the year and I try to throw all these statistics at you guys and it's like, where did these come from? So I am keeping track of some statistics this year. I'm going to keep track of my monthly genres, reading levels, format, overall ratings, and the overall emotion of how I felt that month reading. So for the month of January, I read 1 realistic, 1 romance, 1 mystery, 2 sci-fi fantasy, 1 poetry, and 3 other. So other category is like historical fiction, or like if it had multiple genres in it, I'll throw it in other, because I don't want to like pick one genre over the other if they're pretty evenly distributed. So that's what other is. For reading level, I read 2 children's book, 2 middle grade, 2 new adult, 1 young adult, and 2 adults. I will get better at reading off these statistics, I'm sure, but this is the first month, so give me a break. For formats, I read 1 paperback, 2 hardcover, 1 ebook, 2 audio, and 1 graphic novel. And if you guys haven't caught on, my notes are right here, so I'm reading the right things, so that's why I keep looking down. For my overall star ratings, I had 3 5-star books, 2 4-star books, 1 3-star books, 3 2-star books, and 0 1-star books. That's also hard to say because that's a lot of numbers. I'm going to have to put like a graphic or something up for these because these are hard to say. But overall, that gave me 32 out of 45 possible stars. So for the 9 books I read, I could have had 45 stars if they were all 5-star books, and I got 32 out of that. So not too bad. I would have liked that number to be a little higher. And that kind of brings me to the overall emotion that I felt this month reading. I was pretty split half and half. I had half of the books that I liked, half of the books that I read I really enjoyed, really liked. Half of the books that I read, I was like, meh, or like irritated reading them. I don't know, they weren't my favorite. But yeah, I will tell you guys what each book was about, and you guys can kind of judge for yourself if you think you would have liked it or been meh about it. So the first book that I read this month was Once Upon a Dream by Liz Braswell. This is from the Twisted Tales collection, published by Disney Press. So my goal was to read all of these books before I went to Disney World. However, my mom and I decided we're not going to join my family on our trip to Disney World this time. Her and I are going to go on a cruise in July, over July 4th weekend, because A, I already have the time off from work, so I don't have to take extra time off. B, it's a little bit cheaper than going to Disney World, which we super appreciate. And C, it's just something that we think we're going to enjoy more. Like, I love the kids. I love spending time with them. I love Disney World, and I super wanted to go to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter at Universal this year. However, I just kind of right now in my life need a relaxing vacation. I don't want to be walking around a lot, and as much as I want to go to Universal to go to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, just right now I feel like I'm having a lot of problems with my knee and my feet, and I'm just not in a position where I feel like I can handle a lot of walking right now and then go do my job successfully the week after. Like, I feel like I would need like a full week off in order to do that. So yeah, I don't know. We're not going to go, but I do still want to finish this collection this year because this one was really good. So this is Once Upon a Dream, and this is the retelling of Sleeping Beauty. And it's basically if Sleeping Beauty never woke up. So the prince gives Aurora a kiss, and instead of Aurora waking up, the prince ends up falling asleep. They are trapped inside this nightmare world that is run by Maleficent, where Maleficent has tricked Aurora into believing that everybody is evil, including her parents and the fairies that help her in the original telling of the story. However, Aurora catches wind that Maleficent is actually killing the people of her kingdom, basically, to keep herself alive and among these dream-stated people, and keep herself conscious among them so that everybody else believes that she is the good one. When she catches wind of this, Aurora takes off into the woods and she decides that she needs to figure out how to wake herself up. But she's really struggling with like her inner self, and this is what I really loved about the book is she had a lot of depression. Like, Aurora has a lot of depression in the book. She talks about how she'll just sleep when she's upset. Instead of working through her problems, she'll just sleep. And instead of really, like, believing in herself and stuff, that we kind of get that overall, like, oh, Disney princesses are so confident in themselves and stuff like that. She's not. She's very downtrodden on herself. She's very hard on herself, and she doesn't have a positive outlook on life. And she doesn't have a positive outlook on the people around her. So it really talks about depression and overcoming depression. I think that was my favorite part about this book, was that it really touched on that. And I actually got a little emotional during this book reading it, because I was like, I feel that. Like, as somebody who has depression, I felt so much connected to Aurora. And I thought this was really, really well done. I liked it a lot better than I liked Part of Your World last year. And it's funny because I actually like the movie of Little Mermaid and like the story of Little Mermaid better than I like the Sleeping Beauty movie. But I just, like, this book just connected to me in a different way. And I think it's just because my depression has been so hard since my dad's passed away that it was like, it gave me so much hope. This book was just full of hope that you can overcome it. I did give this book 4 out of 5 stars, mainly because there are a lot of cliches in here. One being, and this was in 3 books that I read this month, but one of the biggest cliches that I despise is, she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Like, can we get rid of that line? It is in so many books, and I know I'm not the only booktuber with problems with this, because I have heard other booktubers talk about that, but this book had that line in it. And I didn't dock a full star for just that, but there was other things that were pretty cliche in it as well that I was like, oh, really? Like, we had to put that in there. That was just the one that stood out to me the most. So this book did cover the TBR prompt for me of next in a collection, and overall I think it was pretty good. I'm pretty satisfied with the read, and this was one of the ones on like the good side of the readings that I did this month. The next book that I read this month was Shout by Laurie Halse Anderson, and this is a poetic memoir that kind of tells the story that was behind her story that she wrote, or book that she wrote, Speak. So if you guys haven't read Speak, Speak is about a girl who is entering 9th grade who gets raped at a party over the summer, and she calls the cops because she got scared, obviously, as she should have been. But she got scared, she calls the cops, but nobody knows why she calls the cops, so everybody thinks that she just did it to break up the party. And so she goes into 9th grade with not a single friend and everybody disliking her. So Shout is based off of the real story behind that, and basically it talks about how Laurie Halse Anderson was raped by kind of a friend that she didn't really know, and how she had to overcome that, how she had to, pull herself up. But then it also goes into the hashtag Me Too statistics, and how women need to come together and fight all this stuff, and how we need to educate young men and why this is bad. And this book was just, it was a lot of girl power, a lot of history about Laurie Halse Anderson, and then a lot of what we could be doing today to educate men to not do this and to teach people that this is wrong. Like, and I loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It did cover the TBR prompt for newest purchase for me out of my TBR, and it also covered my reading rivalry prompt of a book written by somebody from New York. Laurie Halse Anderson actually I went to school with her son, her stepson. We didn't know each other or anything, which I talk about in my other vlog. But so she's right in the same area as me, and I've actually met her a couple times. She's a really sweet person when I've met her. Obviously I don't hang out with her on Sunday or anything like that, but the couple times that I met with her at book signings, and like she came and talked to my school a couple times. She was a really sweet person, and honestly the story behind this, I would never have guessed that Speak was based off of her true life. Like, and reading this, it just like opened my eyes. Like, I ended up writing to her and just sending her a DM. I didn't get like a response or anything. I'm sure she gets a lot of DMs. I'm like not mad about it, but I like sent her a DM just saying that like the best part of this book wasn't even the like Me Too statistics or anything like that. It was the fact that she talks about the death of her father, and it's just something that I needed to hear right now, and how she overcame that passing and stuff like that. So I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I don't think Lori Halse Anderson could go wrong. I love all of her books, always, even though they break me. Every book she writes breaks me. But overall, a pretty good book. The next book that I read I listened to on audiobook. It was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. So if you guys don't know what Tom Sawyer is about, which would be kind of weird, I feel like everybody knows what it's about, but it's about a little boy in the 1800s who just gets himself into so much mischief. He goes everywhere from like getting in trouble at school, to falling in love with a girl, to getting himself stuck in a cave, to getting himself trapped on an island where everybody thinks that he's dead, and he appears at his own funeral, and like he just gets into so much mischief and trouble, and he does it all with his friend Huckleberry Finn. One day they discover a big secret, and it's going to change somebody's life and change the town drastically, and they need to decide if they're going to come clean and admit that they were there and saw this thing happen, or if they're going to keep their mouths closed. Overall, this book is 5 out of 5 stars for me. I love Tom Sawyer. I love how Mark Twain writes it. I love that he kind of incorporates himself into it. Like, this author was so smart. If Tom Sawyer was this smart, he'd be just as smart as this author or something. Like, you know, like, it's just funny. It's really humorous. I know that there's a lot of problems with this book because it talks about slavery, and it talks about, you know, things of the 1800s that are not agreeable with today. But overall, I feel like for the time period, this was very humorous, and this was very, like, something that I just, if I needed a smile on my face, I would pick up again. So I did give this 5 out of 5 stars, and overall, top-notch book. I love it. I would read it again. I've already read it multiple times, but I would still read it again. The next book that I read, I also read on ebook. It was a graphic novel, and it is Bloom by Kevin Panetta. So what happens in this book is Ari is fresh out of high school. He's like young adult, still in his teens, and he is kind of forced to work in his father's bakery. However, he loves his music and he wants to go on tour with his music. So he ends up finding somebody else to work at his father's bakery instead of him, and he finds Hector. Hector is fresh out of a relationship. He is trying to find his own way in the world, and he's trying to he wants to be a baker. It's his dream, it's his life, and it's kind of just the thing that makes him the most happy. So Ari ends up hiring him as a baker, and when they start spending more time together, they start realizing that they might have feelings for each other. However, Ari is really dead set on getting out of the town and getting out of his father's bakery, and Hector is pretty happy where he is. So this book I gave 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't like my favorite read ever. I'm not a big graphic novel person because it doesn't super set up like the world for me. It doesn't give me a lot of background detail about characters that I usually like, but it's not horrible. I thought it was pretty good. It did fulfill the TBR prompt of a graphic novel for me for my TBR, but I also used it for a story with a breakup for my Reading Rivalry Friends Readathon. So it did cover 2 things for me. Again, it was just kind of a middle book for me. Middle of the road. Not super fantastic or anything, but if you like graphic novels and if you like little romance stories in graphic novel form, then you would probably like it. It's just not my cup of tea. The next book that I read was Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. So this book, I thought I was going to be super emotional because this is about a boy named Peter whose father decides he's going to go to war, and he has to basically get rid of his pet fox that he's had for forever, and he throws a ball into the woods one day and watches Pax leave him, and Pax is his fox. Pax is his fox, and he watches Pax leave him, and he drives away with his father, leaving his fox behind. However, he gets to his grandfather's house where he's staying, and he realizes that his dad had a dog when he was a kid, and he didn't think it was fair that his dad got to have a pet and he didn't. So he sets out in the middle of the night hiking through the woods, and he goes on search to find his pet fox. However, in the meantime, we get Pax's point of view, which is the fox, and he is kind of found a place in a small, is it a herd? Is it a pack? Is it a pack of foxes? What is it? But he found a little group of foxes that he has befriended and kind of needs to prove his worth among. And he kind of settles in and gets used to being in the wild again. This is kind of like a children's version of Call of the Wild, in my opinion. However, within it as well, we get like a lot of talk about friendship, about relationships, and about how like war affects people. And we do that through somebody that Peter meets along his journey, as well as Peter's own discoverings and Pax's discovering of what war actually is and how it affects the animals of the area that is under war. This also really has a lot to do with like finding your own way in the world, like not just believing something because your parents tell you to believe it, but believing it for your own worth. And I think that has a really good underlying message for kids. However, I did only give this book 2 out of 5 stars. This was another one that had a lot of cliches in it. I didn't super love the parts where it was Pax's point of view because there was no dialogue, so it was a slow read. Like, I'm just reading details. I'm just reading about the actual actions of what's happening instead of being like, instead of given that imagery, like it's just kind of telling me what's happening instead of showing me what's happening. And it had the cliche of he let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. I'm so sick of it. 3 books I read this month had that. Oh, it was super frustrating. However, I don't know. This was one of the ones that I was kind of just meh about. I did like the ending. Did I like the ending? I don't know. I want to say that I like the ending because it was very realistic. But at the same time, as somebody who is reading this is like a middle grade. Is it middle grade or children's? I guess I would consider it middle grade. Yeah, so it's more middle grade, I guess. But as somebody who is reading this middle grade book of children's semi-fantasy, I kind of wanted there to not be like a boom, hit you with a depressing ending, because that's the realism of it. Kind of wanted something a little bit more hopeful. I don't know. I guess kids need to be exposed to sad things too, but this was my TBR pick. For my nephew pick, when I laid out 3 books for him, this is the one he picked because, I mean, it has a fox on the cover, so of course he's going to pick it. But I did finish that one, and I also used that one for A Story of Friendship for my Reading Rivalry Friends Readathon prompt as well. The next book that I read was an audiobook. It was Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. This wasn't part of my TBR originally. This was a book that I read separately. And I read this for my Reading Rivalry Friends Readathon for a book written by an Asian author, which I didn't really understand how that kind of played into the whole Friends theme, but it was what it was. But basically, if you haven't read this book yet, it is about the Lees, and the Lees' oldest daughter dies suddenly. Her name is Lydia, and she dies suddenly, and everybody is pretty sure she committed suicide. However, the family doesn't want to believe that yet. They think foul play was involved. But in the process of going through grieving for their daughter, they discover a lot of secrets, including adultery, just things from her past, like the daughter's past, that they didn't expect. She was kind of like the mother's pride and joy. She wanted her to become like a doctor or a scientist or something, and that wasn't Lydia's dream. And then her father really wanted her to be a social butterfly and somebody who was accepted by all of her peers, and that just wasn't her reality. So it kind of shows a lot of that like parent pressure and what it leads to, but it also kind of talks about how like keeping secrets and stuff were damaging this family as well. This book does take place in the 1970s, so if you like a book that takes place in a different era, that was kind of cool for me. I wasn't expecting it to be taking place in that time, so it was extra exciting for me. I did give this book 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was pretty good. I couldn't read it all at once, and I did listen to the audiobook. I loved the audiobook reading that I listened to. I did find one on YouTube that I listened to, but the person who read it did remind me a lot of the people who read the Taylor Jenkins Reads audiobooks that I do like. However, this book was only a 4 out of 5 stars for me because it just had this melancholic tone to it, and it just had a lot of melancholy just There was no happy or funny parts in it at all. It was just sad. So I had to read it in slow bits and listen to it like when I was doing something else, so I didn't just let that overwhelming depression kind of seep over me. So it was a very depressing book. But yeah, 4 out of 5 stars. Like, I feel like that was almost too generous of rating. I think one of those stars kind of came from that I liked the person reading the audiobook. I've heard mixed reviews about this a lot. Some people like it and some people just don't. I don't know. I guess I liked it. I liked it enough to give it 4 stars when I read it, but now thinking back about it, I can't remember why I liked it, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. Like, I think in the moment it was a really good, like, I finished it. I did it. I got through this really sad book, and now that I'm kind of thinking back on it, I'm like, did it really deserve 4 stars? But I always rate in the moment, and that's why I do it, so that I can't go back and be like, nah, I don't really like it all that much because I read a better book 5 seconds later. The next book that I read was Underlying by Janelle Harris. I read this as an ebook on my Kindle. It was one of the free Kindle options for one of the recent months. I did download it for that, and I used it for my TBR prompt of predicted bad book. Unfortunately, it lived up to that prompt. I did only give this 2 out of 5 stars. Basically, what happens is Susan and Paul have a young daughter that is 2 years old. Her name is Amelia, and she goes missing at a neighborhood party that they are throwing. The mom, Susan, expects the daughter to be alive, and Paul expects the daughter to be dead. So it's kind of an ongoing mystery of what happened to the daughter, who took the daughter. Did she die? Did she not die? Kind of thing. But within it, there are like so many plot twists of why, who, where, how. And I thought I was going to really like that. Unfortunately, the plot twists for me were a little predictable. This book also took place in Ireland, so I didn't always understand some of the slang or language being used because they have different slang and different terminology than we do for some things. But I do like reading books that take place in another country for that reason. I just wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't really in the mood for it, so it kind of threw me off that it was written by an Irish author. Not saying that was a reason to dislike it, it just threw me off. However, the reason that I didn't like it was because even though it was like, it had an interesting plot line, it just didn't live up to it. Some of the things that happened, there was a gigantic fact that was not even acknowledged that I was like, wouldn't this person have known who did it? Duh. Kind of thing. And I feel like it got really overlooked when writing it, because I was like, you're not explaining to me how this person hasn't turned anyone in yet. This is, So yeah, I pretty much said that this book was meh and irritating. I was irritated because it did not tell me the facts that I needed to be like, okay, this is realistic. It just gave me facts that related to the story and not the realism of the situation, and that bothered me. However, I did give it 2 stars instead of 1 star because the overall plotline had promise, and I got sucked in by some of the twists, but I just couldn't. It would twist and then I'd be like, oh. Yeah. This book that I read, I actually listened to on audiobook. It was The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. If you have not read this, this is a classic children's story. I'm sure you know who Pooh Bear is, but if you don't, I will tell you. He is a bear with very little brain, and he is the toy of Christopher Robin. And basically this story is telling the story of somebody telling a story. If that makes sense. It is about somebody who is telling the story to Christopher Robin about how him and Pooh live in this magical forest called the 100 Acre Woods, where him and all of his stuffed animals are alive, and these are the adventures that they go on. So it covers everything from the adventures that you classically know to the giant rainstorm that the Disney version is famous for, hunting heffalumps, which the Disney version is famous for, but then also Eeyore's birthday and Pooh going over to Rabbit's house and all this stuff. So there's like a lot of different adventures in it. It's almost kind of like a bunch of little stories all wrapped up into one story. I personally found the audiobook delightful. It was amazing. I did find it on YouTube. I can't remember who read it. I will try to link the link to the YouTube video down below, but it was delightful. It filled my heart with so much joy. This book was 5 out of 5 stars for me because, and no, this isn't like a picture book or anything. It is a chapter book. If you look up the original classic version, it is a chapter book. So It was a 5 out of 5 star book for me. It was a short read, a quick read, but it was the best thing. And I needed it so bad because I've read a lot of depressing books this month. And a lot of them were like heavy. And I just needed something that like I was walking down the road with my earplugs in, just giggling at little Piglet and Eeyore. And oh, it just filled me with so much joy. I loved it so much. So it was 5 out of 5 stars. It did not cover any of my TBRs. It was just kind of a fun little thing that I wanted to read this month. And I'm glad that I did it. The last book that I read for the month of January was Words on Fire by Jennifer A. Nielsen. This book is about Audra, who is living in 1893 Lithuania, which is when the Russian Cossack soldiers are kind of invaded still, like they were there for a long time, but kind of invaded still in the country, and they have put a press ban on all books and literary material that is written in Lithuanian. They want Lithuania destroyed as a country and to have never existed ever. And obviously that's not something you can do. So Audra becomes kind of by circumstance within this group of book smugglers and becomes a book smuggler, and because of that she faces a lot of danger with the the Russian soldiers and basically losing her language of Lithuanian. She ends up kind of getting into more trouble than she can handle, and she relies on her friend and kind of her companion throughout this book, Lucas, to bail her out of that trouble, but she quickly learns that Lucas isn't going to always be there, and she has to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet. This book I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. It wasn't that it was bad. It was just very slow going, and a lot of it didn't have a lot of realism for it. She escapes a lot from these Russian Cossack soldiers, and I'm not sure that would have happened. Like, they really play the soldiers off as dumb people, and I know based on like history and stuff like that a lot of people lost their lives and went to like some serious prisons where people lost their lives just living in the prison because it was such bad conditions. So yeah, I don't know if she necessarily would have escaped as much as she did within the book. And also, when there wasn't dialogue, it was just a very slow read. There was a lot of unnecessary detail that I didn't really need. And I don't say that a lot about books. Usually I like detail, but this is just a lot of like, and then I was walking along the lake, and then I was walking along the woods, and then I was walking, and I'm like, okay, you're walking. Got it. You could say you just walked for a long time. I don't need to know every single location you went to. And again, this book had not the exact words, but a version of, she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. People, stop writing that. It's driving me nuts. Anyway, this covered the TBR prompt for Mom Pick. So this is one that my mom picked off my shelf. She actually bought this book for me. She didn't know what it was about. She just kind of bought it for me one day. But yeah, it wasn't a horrible, I think that the storyline was good, and I really liked the plot line. Again, same as Underlying. I really liked the plot line, and I think that the plot line had a lot of promise. There was just a lot of details that fell flat for me, and I was like, would that have actually happened? Or maybe not so much. But yeah, 2 out of 5 stars. So again, that was all the books that I read for January. I did get through my entire TBR raffle, 7 books that I needed, plus 2 extras, and I am super happy that I did this raffle because it's kind of holding me more accountable for finishing more books a month since I have the yearly goal of 100 books. I am excited to get through more. You guys have, I'm sure, seen my February TBR video by now, and if you haven't, please go watch that because I think I might die in February with all the things that I have to read and how many pages I have to read. It's ridiculous. However, I think that January is a pretty good start to a reading month. I did get into a little bit of a slump with some of them, like it was just boring and I really had to like bribe myself to get through a couple of them, but overall the ones that were good were amazingly good, so I can't complain about that. 3 5-star books is nothing to joke about. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for more videos of my February reading and February ridiculousness that I get myself into. All right, thanks so much for watching. Bye!